what are we not doing and what is no one else doing, but would be like unbelievable if we could pull it off.
What are your thoughts on sort of new digital age that a lot of these industries are moving towards?
When technology gets used for people to be people, to give humans more time to do other things, that's where the positive impact from a safety perspective happens. Relationships and trust aren't built behind computer screens. They're built standing next to somebody performing a task together, right? If we let AI control a pre-job meeting, which some are trying to accomplish that, you're actually not accomplishing the meeting. Trust and building relationships is such a huge important factor to a team. It's amazing what people are willing to do for each other when they know others will do the same for them.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inspiring Industry podcast, where we share our conversations with leaders from around the globe. I am especially excited about this episode. I think it takes such a unique and fresh take on leadership and software, AI, and technology in the industry. Our guest today is Deren Boyd, the SVP of New Markets for KPA Services, a business that specializes in safety software. And not only am I excited about the expertise and the insight that Deren will bring to the conversation, but from the research that I've done on him as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator in the industry, he is also from a sports background. And so his perspective on leadership is taken with a team mentality. And from our conversation, you'll also hear some very interesting perspectives that include the show Ted Lasso. So without any further ado, we'll jump straight into it. Deren, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I am really excited about this conversation. Like I said, because I think that there will be more than just discussing software and safety. I think there's a lot for other people to learn from what you're going to share with us today. But to get us started, I'd love to know a little bit more about the work that you've done throughout your career and how that's kind of shaped you as a leader.
Yeah, well, Danielle, appreciate the opportunity to be on and good to talk with you from across the pond today. I'm just south of Oklahoma City, so in Norman, Oklahoma, home of the University of Oklahoma, which is where I went to school. My career started there as a undergraduate student. I had an opportunity to go and work with the University of Oklahoma women's basketball team, and did that for a few years in that undergraduate role. And when I graduated, the coaching staff was like, we got to figure out a way to, what's a position that you would be interested in sticking around for? And so they created a job for me, which was called the Director of Basketball Operations, which is a role common to all staffs these days. It was fairly new back then. But I did that for, 4 or 5 seasons, 6 or 7 seasons. I lose track. Had a blast doing it. Worked with an incredible coaching staff who I learned a ton from. That'll probably, kind of be part of the conversation today, just from a leadership perspective. You kind of pull different pieces out of people that you interact with throughout life and incorporate that into your own style. But did that until, gosh, I'm going to start dating myself if I throw years out there, but I did that for a while. We had some successful seasons. I ended up leaving athletics, like the individual sports specific side, and went into administration. So for about another 5 or 6 years, I moved over to athletics development and was an assistant athletics director at the university, which was fundraising, working with donors, the facilities and all that kind of it takes to pay for student athlete scholarships and all of those things. A lot of it is privately funded. So I kind of led the team that did that, and then ended up going back to individual sport and worked with the men's basketball program, and head coach Jeff Capel, who's the head coach at the University of Pittsburgh today, great friend, learned a ton from Coach Capel. He moved on in 2011, and excuse me, through a mutual friend, they had started a oil field service company, and knew that I was transitioning out of kind of the sports world. Excuse me. And got a job in oil field kind of services. And so we were a water transfer company. I knew I mean, my extent of like know-how with oil and gas was like where to gas up my car. You know, like I knew how to fill up my truck, and that was about it. So it was a pretty big learning curve to kind of figure that out. About 90 days into that job. So my job, I was hired in on the operations side and was going to oversee a location or two. About 90 days in, I was asked if I would consider taking over the health and safety department. We were growing like crazy. We had about 1,200 employees. We were in about 24 different locations across the U.S. And safety was, like anything, you have those support services that are playing catch up to the speed of operations. And so it was really just time that we focus in on the health and safety world. So I clueless. Google was my teacher. Like I just did not understand acronyms or what we were even talking about, but accepted that role and did that for about 5 years. And that really is what kind of hatched the idea for a software product. And in 2014, teamed up with two others, and we started to develop this product to just help make life easier in that safety space. And it's a never ending, always, it just feels like you're always playing catch up, like you're always behind, you're always a step out of being fully compliant. And there just wasn't a software that I felt was meaningful enough to buy at the time. And so got a brilliant partner who's just a wizard when it comes to writing code, and another partner who happens to be my brother. And the three of us started a company, not having the first clue of even how that worked, but just started fighting our way through it, and ended up developing a software product that started to gain some traction in the market, and then ended up selling that business to KPA Services, which is who I'm with today. And really exploded the software just beyond my thought of where it could go. It's been a really cool journey to see, but that kind of brings me up to speed today of being here talking to you.
That's awesome. I mean, that's actually really impressive, because obviously now you serve as the SVP of new markets for KPA, which then, I mean, you've kind of brought us into the sort of background about how you ended up with KPA. So let's talk about the business. Let's talk about what the company's sort of strategy is and your role in helping it achieve that strategy.
Yeah, so KPA Services really got started in the consulting world with kind of boots on the ground, being on location at facilities, primarily in the automotive space, car dealerships, tire changing stations, oil change facilities, those kind of environments. It has certainly grown over the years and has grown aggressively over the years, really with a big focus now in software. And so there's about 8 or 9 different software products. I say 8 or 9 because some of them overlap just a little bit, but software products that are sold. Training is, it's a flag we fly proudly just because we feel it's as good as it gets. So the content itself, we have a team dedicated to creating that content. They do a fantastic job. And then really just kind of bringing the expertise to the table. So it's a great mix of both software and industry know-how to kind of combine both of those efforts to try to just create the best product and services available. So really, those would be the three that I think that we kind of encompass and go after from a business standpoint. My role there, the product that KPA acquired that I was a part of, back 10 years ago, which is wild. Wow. That's my focus, is the growth and expansion of that software. So that means a lot of different things. It means sales. I will interact and do some, the network in the oil field and the energy space. I just know a lot of folks and have been glad and excited, and it's been awesome to just kind of help them along their safety journey and what makes sense for them to apply to be better. And so I get a lot of just referral discussions, hey, call this guy. He can kind of talk to you about, this, that, and the other. And so that's a big focus for me. Product itself as well. I continue to have a role there of just, there's things that, when you're working in the software world, there's always, you want the software to perform well. You want it to scale properly. You want to add, the bugs are a thing, right? So like, just how are we making sure that the software is running as efficient as possible? But then there's always what's the next service that we're going to provide within the product? What's the next feature? That, to me, that's where a lot of like the creative juices start to flow, because there are so many opportunities to do the next thing. And I'm a big, I like to think of we have quote unquote competitors, right? Like there's other softwares that are sold that are comparable to ours. I like to think of them as worthy rivals, right? Like there's stuff that they're doing that's impressive that we need to up our game and get better at. I feel like we do a lot of stuff that's maybe better than them. It's no different than comparing an athlete to an athlete. Like, they're going to have different skill sets and perform differently, but, be effective. And so, you look at those, and so there's a competitive landscape to the software about how are we doing versus them. Not that we're out to win against them, but again, worthy rivals, right? Like we want to, how can we elevate our game to be on par or better than them? But then there's the innovative side, which is really where the creative, fun is. And that's, what are we not doing? And what is no one else doing, but would be unbelievable if we could pull it off and kind of change the way things get done. And so Steve Jobs has a quote about, putting a dent in the universe, how can we, there's stuff out there that needs, there's bottlenecks and there's gaps and there's issues and all of this, and software to a degree can help, but gosh, if we could just tweak this one thing and it would change the game. That's the exciting stuff. So I get a chance to work with the product team, the developers. We've got an incredible set of skilled folks in that front, which has been awesome to be a part of and see that. And then just the day-to-day operational stuff, working back with accounting and rev ops, and then the executive team and the board, and all of those things that you get a chance to kind of be at the table for. So it's a bit of a hybrid / covering many bases and having a lot of plates spinning in the air is just kind of what my day-to-day looks like.
One thing I am really interested in, and it kind of comes across from your bio, from research on you, but sport, obviously having been part of your background, I'd love to know how sport and software, or I suppose the safety element of it, is kind of intertwined into what you do. How do you draw those parallels?
When you know what you know, you lean on that to make decisions and apply. I probably use too many sports analogies. I probably do that with my kids in the house. It's just probably a little bit second nature. But no, I think when you're part of a team, and I would consider team, get the KPA team, right? There's people that I interact with and work with, and we strive for common purpose and all of those things. But I think more importantly is the team dynamic with our customers, and how is the software accomplishing what they need it to. And I can go off on a tangent. Maybe we'll do this later, but just that whole, how is software utilized for improvement? And improvement means a lot. Like that goes in so many different directions. Improvement could be that we're producing zero accidents, zero fatalities, zero vehicle, there's a lot of unwanted events that happen in a working environment. And so how can software be a tool to help them accomplish end results and be better, and that's a sports thing too, right? Like the goal is we're going to show up today, we're going to get a rep in, and we want to be better today than we were yesterday. And we're just going to continue to build muscle to whatever we've got going on and move this ball forward, so to speak. So that's, I don't know. I get razzed a little bit about being a kind of a corny, probably too many dad jokes get thrown out from time to time, but yeah, that's just it. I just lean on kind of what I know and use that as a reference point.
I think that leads quite nicely onto discussing software and technology in general, which, as you say, is gaining massive traction across so many industries. And I think for a lot of people, it's at a rate that is quite unsettling in some instances, because, they're as many pros as they are, there's also a lot that we don't know about it. So I'd love to get your thought as someone who has developed integral software to creating safety and to managing safety. What are your thoughts on the sort of new digital age that a lot of these industries are moving towards?
It's exciting. I think the technology is, you're right, it's moving at light speed, and it's really, really cool stuff that, if used right, I think is going to change everything. I think it can be, it can get to a point where it has a damaging effect at the same time if used incorrectly. So let me rewind back to 2014. So I'm fighting this battle of just trying to keep up, and there's the regulators that I need to make sure I'm compliant with. There's the insurance companies that want to see that we're doing the right thing and we're protecting assets and people and all of that. There's our customers. We worked for about 70 different oil and gas operators, and they all kind of have their own set of rules, and there's common rules, but then there's little nuances that you just got to make sure you're abiding by. One example, there was one customer that required a specific type of glove be worn on their job site. And it wasn't a cheap glove, so we had to manage that. But, don't get caught with the wrong type of glove, the brand. You got to wear Nike, you can't wear Converse. It got to that degree. And so just trying to make sense out of all of that was challenging. And so on the software front, my goal was, how do all of those things I just described required me and my staff. So I had a kind of a safety management team at the different facilities, worked hand in hand with those individuals to accomplish all the things that we had going on. But to accomplish all of those things, it required that we sat at our desk, right? We needed to be behind a computer. I'm inside of a spreadsheet. I'm inside of something. And we were compliant. We were always fighting towards, making sure everything's buttoned up and looking right. But in my mind, the biggest miss was we're at the desk, not with the employees. And so software, I mean, I think when technology gets used for people to be people, to give humans more time to do other things, that's where the positive impact from a safety perspective happens. It's I want to get what I got to get done, and then I want to get out to the field. I want to get out to the shop. I want to get out to the yard, whatever the job site, whatever the working environment is, because really that's where, you know, relationships and trust aren't built behind computer screens. They're built standing next to somebody performing a task together, right? And if we do that, then that respect is gained, that perspective is gained, that ability to be a team is gained. And it's not, you know, I always kind of thought of a safety person as a mall cop, you know, like they're going to show up and they've got one bullet in their gun and they're firing it at somebody. Who's it going to be? You know, like they're going to get it in. Whereas really it's about like being shoulder to shoulder and working alongside and asking questions and being engaged and all those things. And that dynamic has nothing to do with software. That is a byproduct of good software putting us in a position to be there. So I think pushing back from the desk was just such a huge thing for me. And then conversely, we would have safety field. We did job audits. So our team would go out to a field. They were obligated to do this so many times a week. And it was really just eyes on a job. We, you know, go up and down, take pictures, make notes, all of that. Well, we did not at the time have a good software product that made that easy. And so those employees would go to a job and they might drive 2 hours to get there. It might take them 2 or 3 hours to actually perform the full job audit, pictures, notes, comments, all of that. Drive back to their office or home and type it up, right? Like they're going to include, we had a template, they're going to import in their pictures. They're going to, you know, they probably worked off of a notepad while they were in the field. They're going to put all this into a report. Well, that report would go out to the leadership team. It would go out to the management team. It would go out to the operations folks, where they could actually, at the end of the day, see what was going on the job. What did the pictures look like? Was it rigged up properly? Like they could actually have some insight. It was like their crystal ball into the job. Well, a few challenges with that. One is they may have done their audit in the morning and that job report's coming out at 10 o'clock at night. And there's just such a gap of time. If there was an issue or a challenge or something that needed to be fixed, we lost the chance to do that because of the inefficiency of how we were doing it. Yeah. And secondly, to talk about pushing away from the desk to be out with the employees, for me and my team, I wanted them to pull up to the dinner table. Like when you're not on the clock, you need to be where you need to be. And I don't need you at your desk at home while your family's having dinner or you're late to a ball game or there's something else going on and you're trying to crank out this job audit that's due by 9 p.m. Like that just became such a inefficient way on all levels. And so that just became a bit of a mantra of what can we use that's going to allow real time movement of information be done in the field, automatically get sent out to a list of people that can look at it. And then when you clock out, you clock out. Like you're done for the day and we'll see you tomorrow. I think that just from a healthy work-life balance perspective, because there are times, because that just became the norm, right? Like that's the way that it is. And then there would be times where we would get called out in the middle of the night because there's been an incident that we needed to report to. And so now it's kind of this double scoop of, after hours that just became a burden. And so we still had to do that. But if we could alleviate the other and just be more efficient during the day, and that just so stepping into the software, that was a big focus of mine, was just efficiency. How can we get information from the field? And then also I wanted employee engagement, like quickly. And so I'll summarize this quick. There's a kind of a philosophy in the safety world. It's behavior-based safety. It's how can we engage the frontline employees all the way back up to management? Everybody participates, where if you see something, you report it. It could be good. It could be not good. It could be a big fat question. It could be a huge concern. But if I see that there's something going on in the field, I want to submit what we call an observation report. Just report what you observe. Well, we had a program that did this early in those days that I thought it was pretty slick. We created this trifold booklet piece of paper thing that, hey, we're going to print thousands of these books and get them out to the employees, and they can fill out a card and then turn it into their manager, and the manager is going to turn it into the office, and the office is going to put it into a spreadsheet and report off of it. Well, that's all fine and good, but does that piece of paper with maybe some really important information, where does that go? Does it end up in a McDonald's bag thrown out, at the end of the day, with the rest of their unfinished fries, and then if it did work its way, so we work in South Texas. South Texas is a certain times of the year, weird things happen. One of them being, we would have rattlesnakes that, like, when it was cold, they would coil up underneath. We had this black poly pipeline. It was about a 6-inch diameter poly line that we would move water. And when it got cold, these little rattlesnakes would nest right up underneath this poly pipe, because it would attract heat from the sun. And then maybe water was warm, rushing through that, at least warmer. And so I got a piece of paper, one of those little cards that came across my desk, and employees came across this little nest of rattlesnakes, and it kind of burrowed itself underneath this poly line. And, it's like, okay, well, what did we do about this? And is this like a one-off where this was just a one-time thing and it's not a non-issue moving forward? Or are we seeing this dozens of times over, and now we need like a whole new set of like discussion regarding that risk, and how do we mitigate it, and how do we deal with that? So I looked at the date on it, and it was 5 weeks old. So I get a report, I don't even know what the term is, a nest of rattlesnakes. And I inquired back to the manager. I said, hey, I saw that report from the employee about the rattlesnakes, and I was just curious, like, what happened with that? How did we manage that? And they didn't know about it, and the employee wasn't with us anymore. And it just was like one of those things that just kind of, went into a black box, and nothing really happened out of it. So that was also a big element of the software, is if I have an employee who has a concerning experience in the field, and a concerning experience doesn't mean me, I think it's concerning. I want to know if they think it's concerning, because in some cases there's a coachable moment there where we can tell them why it's actually right. And let me tell you why it's right. And here's how we deal with this, or whatever it is. But if it's concerning to them, I want to know about it. And so the technology side, again, trying to speed up the process of really information exchange, is that employee go to their app, fill out an observation card. If they mark it in a certain way, I want my phone to go off in 2 seconds. I want an email to hit my inbox as fast as possible, so we can apply change, so that we can deal with the issue, so we can have somebody go talk to them, so we can fix it in as real time as we can. Because ultimately, going back to that team environment, it just makes us stronger. We're going to be better when we can respond quickly. And this, I've said this time and again, in my opinion, the most damaging thing to a safety culture is crickets. So if I'm an employee and you tell me you want me to report concerning things, I'll do it. Here, this is concerning. if they get no feedback back, if they get no action taken, you're turning around and going so fast in the wrong direction. As opposed to, I had the vice president of health and safety call me within 2 minutes of reporting this. I had my manager reach out and say, thanks for the report. I had like somebody bring us snake chaps and whatever else we need to deal with this for the day, right? Like we're cared for, and that makes such an impact. So safety is amazing. The tools, again, that I feel safety really provides, or how do we give time back to people, and how are we more efficient with it, and how are we more human by using it, as opposed to this safety. It's an interesting dynamic because you're talking software and you're like, I love to order pizza through an app. It's just easier. I don't have to talk to anybody. I pay my babysitter through Venmo. She's not going to know what a check is. Like there's some life efficiencies that technology gives us. You intertwine safety and software, and it's interesting because you actually don't want too much of an easy button with the safety side itself, because you're actually like being conflictive with really what should happen. I'd rather a group of employees actually have a conversation before they start the job. What are we going to do? Who's doing what task? What out here could actually hurt us? Is everybody trained? You guys have your PPE? Everybody got, it's like, I want the words to be said and the conversation to be had, as opposed to some button I push on a mobile app that just does everything for me and I hit send. That doesn't cover it. That exists. So when you talk about kind of how things could go in the wrong direction, if we let AI control a pre-job meeting, which some are trying to accomplish, that you're actually not accomplishing the meeting. You're just letting a safety product artificially do something that it's like, you got to get that rep in, you got to have that conversation that's not being had. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I do feel there is such a advantage when software is used right, and a potential such disadvantage when even if you feel like you're using it right, like you feel like, hey, we're doing the right thing. I think it can end up being a bit of a handicap at the end of the day.
Because I think sort of taking that one step further, like you say, you're kind of finding a balance between using technology well and wisely, which will kind of unlock even more benefits. But a key part to that is sort of human management. And then I think this links quite nicely to the presentation that you told me about. Recently, you did a presentation on leadership and why leadership, despite the rise in tech, is still a critical component to project management. And the talk, very coolly, was based on the show Ted Lasso. So tell me a little bit more about this. And I suppose more, why did the show itself speak to you, and how did you sort of see the link between safety software and leadership?
So no spoilers here. I'm not going to like give out any show information. So if anybody's listening and hadn't finished an episode, don't worry. So I took it's probably been 3 or 4 weeks ago. I took a pretty challenging phone call that was from, I call him a buddy. I mean, I've known him for a long time. He's elevated himself throughout. And so he's moved jobs because he's elevated and had opportunities to do new things. And he's at a new company and he's been there for a year or so. And, he's been trying to convince them to buy our software, and that he really could use it. It's going to be helpful. And he's used it in the past at 2 other companies, and he had a great use case, all of that. But they just never gave him the green light to move forward. And so I get this phone call from him, and he says, well, I've got news for you. We can move forward with buying the software. And he didn't sound excited about it. So I just, just in conversation, I'm like, okay, well, he went on to share that they had an employee who had just worked a double shift, so nearly 24 hours out, had a lengthy drive, which is not uncommon in the oil field world to have to drive, out to a location that's might be an hour or two away. Worked a double shift, was coming home, fell asleep at the wheel, went off the road, and he did not survive. And so that apparently gave, because now you've got scrutiny on your safety program in so many ways. You've got the insurance, the legal, I think DOT responds to the vehicle stuff. And so my immediate response back to, we'll call him Ed. My immediate response back to Ed was, man, I know this, but our safety software wouldn't have prevented that accident. Like the way what you just described, man, I know, but that's a leadership thing, what are you I was comfortable enough with him, and he and I had been in the foxhole with each other before where we could talk honest with each other. So I wouldn't normally do this, but it really just got me thinking that, if he just now got the approval for that, it makes you wonder, do people think that software is some sort of cheat code or some sort of hack that all of a sudden can just magically make things better? Yeah. And I said, there are so many opportunities that you have at that company to improve. And I'm excited for you because you're going to make a huge impact to that. And software should be, in my opinion, one of the tools that you use. But at the end of the day, it's the leadership of what's going on that's going to really be impactful. There were a lot of misses that somebody, if they were paying attention, should have caught that occurred with that particular event. So you mix that phone conversation with my wife and I at home. We're slow TV watchers. It takes us forever to get through anything because, you got to pick, and even an episode might take us 3 nights because we're, 20 minutes here, 15 minutes there. But we were going through season 3, just finished season 3, right around that same week. And it just kind of got me thinking, gosh, that Ted Lasso effect, how you talk about the movement of technology and AI and how light speed that is. You sure hope that good quality leaders remain intact. And really, I think they'll see the software side as a tool, not a fix. It's not ultimately the software is going to get you to a place to be successful. So that was kind of my angle that I took. Software has tremendous value. And I mean, software period, let alone safety. I mean, there's just the way it is, right? And it's only improving. But, when you get into all the dynamics of what Ted Lasso brought to the table and the leadership traits that he had, as quirky and folksy as they were, if I could bottle up some Ted Lasso, I mean, I'd be selling that all day over software. If you could actually have him on your team, man, you talk about a game-changing impact. That probably would be the hack or the fix. So that was really kind of the angle that I took on the talk, and kind of why it was just one of these moments of really where software and leadership comes to head at times, and what people's perspectives are, and how getting the green light after an incident like that is kind of frustrating, and to feel like software is going to be the fix. So I don't know if I'm kind of on a tangent a little bit, but that's really kind of how it got to that point of that discussion.
I want to take that one step further and ask how the show has impacted your own leadership perspective and what you've absorbed from it to kind of then share with your team.
Yeah. I'd mentioned, and I think this is true for any of us, that, your personality is made up of people that you've interacted with, right? Like it's people who have sewed into you over time. It's people who from a distance you admire and respect. It's people who have attributes that you want to incorporate into yourself, right? Like we all become a mix of, maybe even in negative situations, we take how an experience is and how we want to make sure we don't act in that way, or we don't treat people in that way, or we don't use that type of words or language, or whatever the situation is. So, with me, I think the Lasso stuff it reiterated a lot of things that I had learned from experience throughout the years from leaders in my life. Women's basketball, Sherry Cole, just shout out to Sherry Cole. She's a mentor. She's a friend. She's a confidant. She is somebody who I worked with for 8 years. We have coffee every other week. Even to this day, I stay plugged in with her. It's like you just do life with people. And one of my favorite quotes that she had ever said, I don't even know if she knows this is a quote of hers, but it was in the realm of leadership. I think she was talking to the players at the time, but she said kind of the rules of the road: do your job, don't be dumb, and pick up trash. And it's the third one that I think kind of resonated the most with me was, leaders. I think sometimes people think that leaders are, it's rank. It's where I am in the organization. And being highly ranked doesn't necessarily, in some cases, doesn't mean you're a leader at all. Like we respect rank because they have authority over us, and we do what they say because they have authority over us. But that's not necessarily leadership. I know and worked with and been side by side in really difficult situations, coworkers who have little to no authority, but are incredible leaders, that they lift up the people to their left. They lift up the people to their right. They encourage, they have empathy, they have perspective. When things go south, they're the first ones to step up or show up. And so the picking up trash comment for me was one that, leadership is a servanthood. Leadership is if I'm building a legacy, I'm building my legacy lives through other people. And so, I think the Lasso way does that. He goes against the grain in so many scenarios that I think the natural reaction, just kind of getting into our own flesh, our own mind, our own way of dealing with stuff, is we want to just scream back out. We want to cuss somebody out. We want to, the empathy, the perspective, the taking 5 minutes and just taking a step back and looking at a situation, understanding people are different, understanding people tick in different ways, understand people need to be motivated and inspired in different ways. That all resonates to me from that servant leadership perspective. And I think that's we're in desperate need of that being more the case. I think everybody's so quick to come down on one another that we don't lift each other up enough. And I think that creates a damaging environment to an organization. And so I think when you can pull that off, and it's what's interesting is it's not pie in the sky either. I was putting this talk together last week, and I'm going through like kindness and empathy and grace and forgiveness. And, it's like, you're talking about all this, like, well, that's like not real life. Like that's, but one thing I did kind of go on and I researched and listened to some interviews of the cast and all that. And what I think is awesome is that cast of Ted Lasso is really just made up of a bunch of people. You've got actors and you've got writers and you've got production crew, and they're essentially a working environment. They're just coworkers. They're just people that are just doing this job together. But the interesting dynamic in the quotes that you hear from them, like off show, like the season 3's a wrap. It's kind of done. I would be awesome if they figured out a way to bring season 4 up. But, there's this phenomenon called emotional contagion. And it's this, like psychological research has kind of proven this out, that even just witnessing a kind act, like you're more prone to do something kind to somebody else. And so they talked about that on the show, or like post-production, of just how when you're writing with this spin, when you're writing in such a way and acting in such a way, because of course they're acting their characters out, of all of these traits that are, they feel kind of counterculture a little bit, like just the idea of forgiveness and grace and empathy and perspective and all of that. It had such a profound impact on that working environment. And it just goes to show that it's possible, that it's not this pie in the sky thing, that it just kind of takes a Ted Lasso person to kick it off. And then if that emotional contagion can just be contagious and start to kind of spread itself, I think ultimately it's going to weave its way through the fabric of the entire organization. And then that becomes the culture. And so that was kind of the way I ended my visit with the group last week, was just like, weakness is not soft, and kindness is not weakness. Kindness is not weakness, and forgiveness is not soft. Like that's the harder route to take. But it makes the greatest impact. So I'm really going down a trail here. I don't even remember.
No, I love it. I love it. And I think it's so refreshing, because I think a lot of what you said that resonates with me personally. I think I've always, my leadership adoptions in whatever way I can learn has always been with a servant-hearted mentality, that, I'm here to support my team. I'm here to serve my team so they can be better at their jobs, and they, the effect is rippling. And I think it's really cool to hear what you say, that those values often feel countercultural. And I think this is also when the technology comes in, because we take technology as an easy fix, as a sort of, stopgap to make our jobs easier, so that there's sort of less interaction that we have with the team. And that almost feels like, moving on to my next question, that almost feels like a challenge for industries. What other facets of this conversation, from your perspective, do we need to be aware of to counter that?
I feel like leaders need to, from a leadership standpoint, need to just, being a leader is not about them, right? Like it is about others. And sometimes it's about others you don't even know. I've heard a great sermon about, we all drink from wells that we did not dig. And sometimes those that dug the wells, and you can thank them and appreciate them. A lot of times we don't know who dug a well, right? And we benefit from the actions of somebody else. So I think that mentality of, I'm not a good listener. I'm not a good, if somebody tells me their name, I'm going to forget it in like 15 seconds, like I'm just really bad at that. And I recognize that. And so when I'm starting my day, entering a room, getting ready to have a meeting, like I'm trying to be better at that. And I recognize there's an opportunity for that. So I think being a good listener, that's something that software, the AI stuff aside, I mean, the human to human interaction, it's important to be a good listener. It's important to listen and respond to what's being said, as opposed to be thinking about what I'm going to say as soon as you stop talking. And I'm bad at that. Like it's something I know I need to be in the now and be a part of this conversation, be in the room. You talk about like technology. I have gotten to the point where I try to leave my cell phone behind where I can to make sure that I'm in the room. I think even if you're turning your phone face down at the conference room table isn't sufficient. I think it just speaks to the room that I'm important and someone's going to ping me and I'm going to need to pick this up. And so keep it up at the office. Do the same thing at home. Like if, there's no electronics at the dinner table, that kind of mentality, like be present. And I think that's super important. I think the listening, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much as we talk. I think that's a super important thing from a leadership perspective to remember. And then again, I'm kind of harping on the servant stuff, but, Simon Sinek's got a great book called Leaders Eat Last. And it's kind of this focus on kind of the military, Marines in particular, about, when there are, trust and building relationships is such a huge important factor to a team, and to build that within the team. There is a authoritarian command and control type of a leadership style that tends to create, if that's the only style that there is, that tends to create a culture of distrust. And people start to silo themselves, and I'm going to protect my own, and I'm not really looking to the left or to the right. It's more about me. And I mentioned this on the meeting last week, just because I didn't want this to go missed. In the world of safety, like command and control at times is hugely important. When it's called a stop card. So if I see something on a job site that's like, that could explode, right? If that could explode, command and control is exactly what needs to happen. There needs to be a stop card. People need to cease what they're doing. Do we need to evacuate? Like all of that, like there is a place for it. But when you lead with that day to day, it's a tough environment. However, if you build a team that is based on trust and perspective and empathy and all of these Ted Lasso-isms that we're talking about, if that's the common culture, and then all of a sudden command and control comes into play, they're going to follow without second guessing, because they know that they're the best. You have their best in mind, and there is something that's causing us to like have immediate urgency. And so, those are all things that software, lacks, some of that genuine relational tie-in, and it never will. I mean, I say this, someone's going to watch this 50 years from now, and there's going to be some AI robot that like can have real feelings or something crazy. But, I'm losing track of, Danielle, what the question might have been.
I absolutely think you answered it. Because I think the biggest issue that, from what I've heard from our conversation, that I think a lot of leaders in businesses need to be aware of is that human spirit and that humanness, to look out for your team, to balance raw emotions is part of being a leader. It isn't about calling out commands. It isn't about sending out orders. It isn't basing your leadership on sort of authoritarianism approach. It's getting down with your team. It's sitting in the trenches and letting them know that I'm with you in this as well. And that's what when you incorporate tech and software, that's I think what helps build buy-in. That okay, we can see the longevity of this because our project manager believes in it, and we can vouch for him. And I think that's exactly what you're speaking into. And I think I just want to kind of like round that off a little bit. A lot of our listeners will be leaders themselves. So when you think of advice or maybe for some listeners out there, this is new information and this is something that is kind of, clicking in some cogs. What is one piece of advice that you'd share to kind of empower the conversation that we're having?
There was a quote, I'm going to probably get it wrong. I'm going to do my best here. It was, the death of an individual is a tragedy, but the massacre of thousands is a statistic. Mm. And so I think it's important that we recognize that people are unique. And this kind of goes back to perspective for sure. But as a leader, it's really important that we understand our people, that we understand that we need to learn them and how they tick and what inspires them and how do they get motivated. In the world of sports, sometimes if you come down too hard on the student athlete, they curl up and they're no good for the rest of the day. It's like they're going to go into a shell. Whereas another, they need you to get in their face and be loud, and that's going to get them going. And so ultimately, you want to provide the best interaction to make them the best version of themselves that ultimately is going to make the team better. And so I think it's important that we figure out what is our common cause as a team, and then making sure we understand that we're all just a bunch of individuals that have a different rhythm to ourselves that need to be handled uniquely in order to go after that common cause. And in the world I lived in, this is free. I don't think a common cause should be we're making money.
Yeah.
It's important that we're all putting money in our wallets. But I think far too often the corporate world is so focused on our quarterly growth and the revenue generation of the organization that they feel like that is the common cause, which I think that falls way short. I think that revenue is a byproduct of a team performing well. I think when a team performs well, that comes. So finding that common cause, I mean, that can be a tough thing. It's not like you're in, there's another Simon Sinek book called The Infinite Game. And it's an interesting dynamic between a finite game, which known players, known rules, agreed upon outcomes. Like we know at the end of this football game, there's going to be a winner and a loser, and it's agreed upon in advance of how this is going to look, versus an infinite game where, players are known or unknown. There are no rules agreed upon, and really the only goal is to just stay in the game, right? Like, just like, let's not drop out. It's this long look ahead of where we're taking this thing. And I really think people desperately want to be part of a team. I think they want, they want some purpose and some meaning and all of that. And sometimes it's just the relationships of those that we're doing the job with, that we're doing life with, that we're engaged with. And so that would be my thing on the common cause is, at the end of the day, we all want to be safe. Like, we want this circle of safety where we know our jobs are intact and our paycheck's going to run on Friday, and, all the things that become, important to us to live life. But then just the day-to-day, the grind, the hard work, the toil that gets taken in some cases, it's amazing what people are willing to do for each other when they know others will do the same for them, and they're willing to, like, be part of that team in such a way that they're not going to let each other down. And so I think that common cause thing, the corporate goals, super important. I get it. But then I think when you're on the front lines, boots on the ground, standing next to people, like, there's a different mindset that needs to exist.
And then with that, Deren, we're kind of at my final question. When you kind of look to the future, what are your hopes? What would you like to see change, or what would you like to see adopted from others in leadership positions when it comes to maintaining safety standards, and also just encouraging the environment that we've been speaking about, so that it filters across the businesses?
Yeah, I think, technology, like we've said throughout, is just light speed. Like, it's changing and evolving so fast, especially with AI. There's some incredible tools that are going to, come out that, are really going to just hit the nail on the head. It's going to be, it's going to change the way we do things in a incredibly positive way. I think it's important at the same time to balance the human side and not lean so heavy on it. I think that's really important. I think from a leadership standpoint, and this is me probably even just talking to myself more than anything, I know my shortcomings, and I know where it's important for me to, like, if I'm going to be better to help my team be better, then what do I need to do? And I think it's super important, especially in this age of information. I think it's really important that we are doing our own research, that we are reading, that we are identifying the people that we respect, how they go about doing it. Because I think we all gravitate towards, being an optimist, I think we all gravitate towards positive. Like, I think we want the feel good. We want the, we want that. So my encouragement from a leadership perspective is, technology is super important. It's going to be there. It's going to make things incredibly efficient, but leaders are still human to human, relational interactions. So if we're going to bolster our technology, how do we bolster ourselves? And so for me, one of my New Year's resolutions, which I'm already behind, is to read a book a month. I'm a super slow reader, but how can I, it's like amazing. If you just commit to like 15 minutes a day, you'll knock it out in like 2 weeks. And I just, I think, well, I'll just do 30 minutes tomorrow and catch up. But what are you reading? I've got a little sticky note on my desk that I ask myself that question. What are you reading? And what are you listening to? There's such good podcasts. there's such good TED Talks. There is great YouTube clips on various things. There's also a ton of trash. And so I think it's super important that we govern ourselves to what are we ingesting, because ultimately whatever we ingest will become part of our style, good, bad, ugly, whatever. And so I think it's really important about how are we making ourselves better and improving ourselves. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, for listeners, I'd say go check it out. I mean, it's mindful of, it's got Roy Kent. I'd use some clips on my talk last week. I couldn't use any Roy Kent because his language is like off the charts terrible. He's an awesome character. You're going to fall in love with him, but just a little bit of a note there. The language isn't probably kid appropriate, but anyway, that would be the thing, is just how are we, if we're going to elevate and know it's coming, the use of technology, how are we also keeping in step with that on a personal level from our own leadership style, and making sure that we're still the forefront, and the software and the technology and all of that is strictly a tool that we're using.
I love that. And I've absolutely loved this conversation as well, Deren, because I think across loads of episodes on Inspiring Industry, we've spoken to leaders who are pushing for AI, who are kind of opening sort of thought processes that are against it, as how we can use it to improve a lot of what we're doing. But on the flip side of that, there's always the concern of, well, to what extent are we going to lose the human element? And I think it's so refreshing to hear a conversation like this where that realm isn't being forgotten, and that it still plays such an integral part in the future of industry, where human and tech kind of work side by side, and we're still placing a heavy emphasis on the human aspect. And I think that this, even just this conversation is just a reminder that those conversations are happening. And it's not just here, it's across the world. No one is neglecting the importance of good leadership, and how to make good leadership not seem like this, self-deprecating flagellation process. I can't lead my team. Well, it's not it at all. It's how do you change your mindset to lead for your team and be with your team, rather than having that separation. So thank you so much for joining us and for just providing that unique perspective. I think that so many listeners out there are going to find this conversation so accessible and so relatable. And I can definitely see it becoming just a handy little go-to tool for lots of listeners out there. So thank you so much, Deren.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, it's great to spend some time with you, Danielle, and it was a great conversation. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Well, there you go. I absolutely love this conversation. I think that Deren, and unfortunately I didn't get it on recording, but we had a little bit of conversation off camera, just talking about how refreshing conversations like that are. And I think that to make leadership accessible, when it often tends to sound a bit like, this challenge of character, conversations like that just prove that it isn't the case at all. And that these are traits and characteristics that we can learn from each other. And it is the core of what I hope this podcast is encouraging as well, to be able to be inspired from other leaders out there and how they're approaching not only industry challenges, but personal challenges. And with that, it is with a bit of sweetness that I say goodbye to our listeners as the host of Inspiring Industry. But yeah, to all our listeners out there, stay in tune for the Inspiring Industry podcast. This is definitely not the end of the project. Far from it. So take care, and until the next episode where we'll share more conversations with leaders from around the globe, see you then. This podcast episode is brought to you by Fine Line Media. Inspiring Industry is written and hosted by Danielle Champ. Our sound engineer and videographer is Gavin Mitchell. Lee Prothero is our creative lead, and he's joined by Jamie Alvin, our graphics designer. Rosie Clegg and Sarah Rudge are our digital marketing executives. And we'd like to extend a special thanks to our assistant editor, Mary Float, and our editor, Libby Hammond. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Fine Line Media and its team.